Are we facing a new paradigm? What is changing in the world that is attracting everyone's attention? You may have heard people talk about there are new private sector actors, there's a private sector perspective, it's about combining doing good and doing well. What exactly does that mean in reality? And I think in the past we have had a world in which that we divided into two pieces. There are for-profit organizations and their purpose is financial returns. On the opposite side, there are non-profit organizations and their purpose is social impact or some form of social good. And we lived in a world where there were these two pieces. If we could travel back in time to the 1990s, my presentation would stop just about there. But since that time, I think we've realized a few things that are changing the way organizations act. The first is that there's really a continuum. Organizations do not go to the extremes. We don't live in a world populated entirely by Ebenezer Scrooge and Santa Claus. We're all human, and we live somewhere in between. And organizations live somewhere in between as well. And as that realization dawned on organizations and people who had entrepreneurial spirit, they began to start new kinds of organizations. These organizations are sometimes called hybrid organizations, designed from the beginning, or perhaps old organizations that were reorganized, specifically to meet objectives that sit in the middle of that continuum, to combine both financial returns and social impact. In the United States, these hybrid organizations can have a special legal status. They're not nonprofit organizations, they're not for-profit organizations exactly, but they are established legally as sitting somewhere in between. Or they can also be certified by certain independent parties as operating as if they are mixing those two objectives in a way that can be verified. So we have two different systems in place that allow us to thank you. I'm a little excited. There are two different systems in place that allow us to identify these kinds of organizations. In addition to this, there are two other trends that are taking place. For-profit organizations are beginning to change their purposes to be more of a mix and to establish explicitly that they want to achieve social impact. And not-for-profit organizations are adopting the mindsets and methods of business to accomplish good. And they're focusing on how they can use market principles and markets themselves as ways of achieving their purposes. Some people have called this trend hybridization, where all organizations are coming together and looking more like hybrid organizations with a mix of purposes. I think it remains to be seen how large this trend is. There's certainly a great deal of talk about it. Organizations are setting themselves up to at least look like they're moving in this direction. But will it last? Does this reflect true motivations? Is this how organizations will continue to act? It's unclear. Let's look at a few examples of organizations that come from those different areas. And I want to begin to do this in a way that helps you see the complexity of this trend. Just that little snapshot of hybridization might give you the impression that this is a pretty simple thing to wrap your head around. But in fact, it turns out to be far more complex. So these three kinds of organizations seek impact in different ways. So probably the most obvious way we could imagine would be that they're seeking impact from products and services that they create. And three examples of that would be Tesla, and let's start with that, Tesla. So they make a car, electric cars. They're a for-profit company. The reason they do this, there's a great market for these cars, and they can make them at a price that allows them to be, well, we think profitable, we're a little bit unsure still. But they've been growing quite a lot. And so this is an example of a company that is set up to be for-profit from the beginning, but has a social component to what they are doing, and one that really drives their mission and what they consider to be quality and success. A not-for-profit example would be the Aga Khan University Hospital. And the way that they operate some of their hospitals, the way they operate the one in Pakistan, is that they use something which is called cross-subsidization. So those who are wealthy enough to pay for services, pay for them. If they are very wealthy, they pay even more. If you can't afford service, you pay nothing. So those who can afford subsidize those who can. A nonprofit organization using a market principle to allow them to make their services more widely available, because their main purpose is to provide healthcare for all. Then there's Pedal Forward, which is a truly American type of organization, started by 3 young business school students to create a company that makes bamboo bicycles. The workers come from backgrounds that would make it hard for them to find employment. They source all the materials in sustainable ways. They're trying to run a company that does good from the beginning. They're set up as what's called a B Corp, which is a certified organization that sits in the middle as a hybrid. And the work's been recognized by a number of different organizations like the Clinton Global Initiative. So those are 3 very different looking organizations that all fall in that first column. But we can expand on that and think about organizations that are seeking impact by the way that they manage and control their value chain. And examples there would be H&M, the Essence restaurant chain, and Fair Trade. So H&M has struggled to be an organization that can operate in a sustainable fashion, given the fact that they produce so much clothing, they use so much cotton, and the clothing industry is one that is not well known for labor practices that are conducive to people's lives. They started what they called their conscious line. Part of that was sourcing all their cotton as organic cotton. And so this is an effort of an organization that's for-profit, deciding to move its mission closer to social impact and to make changes in how it was offering products. Fair Trade Coffee, or Fair Trade, which started with coffee, is a not-for-profit organization that manages value chains so that it can source products like coffee and chocolate in sustainable ways. In particular, what it does is it is able to sell these products for a premium because they are labeled as fair trade, and then takes some of that money back to the people who work in the fields and in the communities where coffee is grown, and this allows them to spend this money in ways that improve their lives. And the Essence restaurant chain was started as an organization that sat in the middle. It was a hybrid. It had a belief that if it connected with local farmers and people in the community, that the food industry could be a way that actually benefited people locally. You build community by making connections and sourcing food in a sustainable and healthy way. And finally, the third column would be impact from investment and capital. And examples would be Fidelity, Sonnen Capital, and Calvert Investment Impact Capital. So Fidelity is a pretty well-known large investment firm. People put their money into it. And one of the ways that they're able to move their mission closer to have more impact is to provide products that have an ESG designation, which means that they invest in companies that are good for the environment, society, and have positive governance kinds of structures. It's a pretty simple change, but one that many people value and some have faith in living. Calvert Impact Capital is known for inventing something which is known as the community investment note. This is something that people, anyone, can put their money into, any amount that they want, but then Calvert invests that money in local entrepreneurs and social businesses to improve the community. And the people who invest their money get a return. So this has been seen as an alternative to philanthropy, so that you could put $1,000 into this, a note. At the end of its maturation, you would get the note plus interest, which you could then roll over and use again to try to create good. And so this has become a very popular way for people to try and leverage their money to create more good. And Sonnen Capital is a company that started from the beginning to combine these two ideas. They want good financial returns, but they want to invest in a way in which they actually change something about how the world works that makes the world a better place. So those are a lot of examples. I felt it was important to maybe show you some concrete organizations that fit into those boxes. But there are 9 boxes. And within each, there are many variations in ways that this could play out, which on its own introduces a tremendous amount of complexity. But it's even more complex than that, because for any sort of impact that you might be thinking about, with regards to education or well-being, there may be players in multiple boxes working simultaneously. And they may be connected to each other, so that a private investment firm is investing in a hybrid organization that's managing the value chain in a way that changes the kinds of products and services that are being offered by different kinds of organizations. So when we talk about impact management, we are almost always talking about it from the perspective of the organization. The manager sits within the organization to create impact. An alternative view is that impact management also includes people at a systems level thinking about how to structure a system so that impact occurs across organizations in a way that takes advantage of all these